I saw you two sneak away earlier. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending nothing happened. Everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are.
The coffee shop was nearly empty at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, just the way I liked it. The afternoon light filtered through grimy windows, casting long shadows across worn wooden tables. I was nursing my third cup of black coffee when Mark stumbled through the door, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Matt," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. His eyes were bloodshot and he reeked of last night's whiskey. "Thanks for meeting me." I'd known Mark for 5 years, ever since we both started at Henderson Architecture. He was usually the life of the party, cracking jokes about our demanding clients and impossible deadlines. Today, he looked like someone had died. "You sounded like hell on the phone," I said, studying his face. "What's going on?" Mark fidgeted with his coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. "Look, I probably shouldn't even be here, but I couldn't sleep last night, and I kept thinking about what happened at the firm's party Friday. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." My stomach tightened. What party? The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Mark's face went pale, and I watched him realize his mistake in real time. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I thought you knew," he stammered. Lila was there and she seemed pretty relaxed, so I figured. "Lila was sick Friday night," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the ice forming in my chest. "She had a migraine, spent the whole evening in bed with Ben and Jerry's." That's what she'd told me anyway. I'd even brought her aspirin and a glass of water before heading out to help my buddy Vince move his couch. When I got home around midnight, she was supposedly asleep. Mark's hands were shaking now. "Matt, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe I was confused. Maybe it was someone else who looked like—" "What exactly did you see, Mark?" He took a long sip of coffee, buying time. "Nothing really. Just, she seemed to be having fun, dancing and stuff. You know how these work parties get." Dancing. My wife, who claimed she was too sick to even watch Netflix with me, had been out dancing at a company party I didn't even know existed. "Which company?" I asked. "Her law firm, Brooks, Patterson and Associates. They rented out that new rooftop place downtown." Mark was talking faster now, like he wanted to get it all out before he lost his nerve. "Eddie Brooks was buying rounds for everyone. Your wife seemed pretty friendly with him." Eddie Brooks. I knew that name. Lila had mentioned him before. One of the senior partners at her firm, recently divorced, drove a red Porsche that cost more than my annual salary. She'd always described him as kind of a sleaze, but apparently that hadn't stopped her from dancing with him while I thought she was homesick. "How friendly?" I asked. Mark looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Matt, maybe you should talk to Lila about this. I don't want to cause problems between you two." "The problems already exist," I said. "I just didn't know about them until now." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Lila's texts from Friday night. There it was, sent at 7:30 p.m. "Migraine getting worse. Going to bed early. Love you." The timestamp burned into my memory. If she'd sent that message, then gone to a party and started dancing with Eddie Brooks, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated lie. "Is there video?" I asked. Mark's silence was answer enough. I threw a $10 bill on the table and stood up. "Thanks for telling me, Mark. I know it wasn't easy." "Matt, wait. Maybe there's an explanation." "There is an explanation," I said, heading for the door. "I just need to find it." The drive home took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. 3 years of marriage, and Lila had never lied to me about anything bigger than whether she'd eaten the last piece of pizza. At least, not that I'd caught her. Our apartment was empty when I got there. Lila wouldn't be home from work for another 2 hours, which gave me time to do some digging. I fired up my laptop and started scrolling through social media. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Jennifer Walsh from Lila's firm had posted a video to her Instagram story Friday night. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. The caption said, "Work hard, party harder. BPA, Dasher Friday night, rooftop." And there was my wife. She was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she said made her feel beautiful. Her long blonde hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was laughing at something Eddie Brooks had whispered in her ear. As I watched, he put his hands on her waist and pulled her closer. She didn't resist. The music was loud, some generic club anthem, and Lila moved her hips to the beat. Eddie's hands traveled lower, and she leaned back against him, her head thrown back in laughter. Other people from her firm were watching, cheering them on. Someone shouted, "Get a room!" and everyone laughed harder. I watched the video 3 times before something inside me finally broke. It wasn't just the dancing, though that was bad enough. It was the look on her face. Pure joy, uninhibited happiness. She looked more alive in that 30-second video than she had in our apartment in months. This wasn't a woman suffering from a migraine. This was a woman who had chosen to be somewhere else, with someone else, rather than spend Friday night with her husband. I sat in our living room, surrounded by 3 years' worth of shared memories, and felt like a stranger in my own life. The framed photos on the mantel showed a happy couple, Lila and me at our wedding, on vacation in Mexico, at my sister's graduation. But looking at them now, I wondered how many other lies I'd missed. How many other Friday nights had there been? My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. She was probably with Eddie right now, maybe planning their next secret rendezvous while texting loving messages to her clueless husband. I walked into our bedroom and pulled my old duffel bag from the closet. It took me less than an hour to pack everything that really mattered: clothes, laptop, a few books, the watch my grandfather had given me. I left behind anything we'd bought together, anything that felt more hers than mine. Before I left, I saved Jennifer's video to a USB drive and left it on the kitchen counter next to my wedding ring and house key. No note, no explanation. The video said everything that needed to be said. My phone started ringing as I loaded my car. Lila's name flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then I blocked her number, along with her email and all her social media accounts. If she wanted to dance with Eddie Brooks, she could do it without an audience of one. Vince lived 20 minutes across town in a converted warehouse that smelled like motor oil and bad decisions. He answered the door in paint-splattered jeans, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without asking questions. "Spare room's yours as long as you need it," he said, helping me carry my bags upstairs. "What happened?" I told him about the video, about the lies, about coming home to an empty apartment while my wife was grinding against her boss at a rooftop party. Vince listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. "What a piece of work," he said when I finished. "You want me to have a talk with this Eddie guy?" Vince was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. He worked as a bouncer at 3 different bars downtown and had never met a problem he couldn't solve with his fists. The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. "Not yet," I said, "but keep the offer open." My phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past hour, calls and texts from Lila's unblocked work number. I finally listened to her voicemails around midnight. The first one was confused. "Matt, where are you? Your car's not here, and there's some weird USB thing on the counter. Call me back." The second was worried. "Seriously, Matt, you're scaring me. What's on this drive? Please come home so we can talk." The third was panicked. "Oh, God, Matt, please. It's not what it looks like. I can explain everything. Please, just come home." The fourth was angry. "You can't just disappear like this. We're married. We need to work through this together." The fifth was desperate. "Matt, please, I love you. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. Please don't throw away 3 years over one stupid night. I deleted all of them without responding. As I lay in Vince's spare bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. The man who had woken up that morning, trusting, loyal, willing to bring his wife aspirin for her fake migraine, was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who had learned that the person you love most can look you in the eye and lie without flinching. Lila wanted to work through this together. She'd had her chance to do that Friday night when she chose Eddie Brooks over honesty. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. I wasn't running away, I was resetting the board, and this game was just getting started. The next morning brought 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from Lila's work phone. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. Vince made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and slid a mug across his kitchen table. "She's persistent. I'll give her that," he said, nodding toward my constantly buzzing phone. "Desperation will do that," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. It tasted like battery acid mixed with hope. She's probably realizing that crying and apologizing won't fix this. Vince had known Lila almost as long as I had. He'd been in our wedding, helped us move into our apartment, spent countless Sunday afternoons watching football on our couch. But he'd never really liked her, something I'd only started to notice in hindsight. "You know what I never understood about her?" he said, settling into the chair across from me. "She always had to be the smartest person in the room, even when she was wrong, especially when she was wrong." I thought about that. Lila was brilliant, law school valedictorian, youngest associate ever promoted at her firm, sharp enough to argue constitutional law or dissect a restaurant menu with equal precision. But Vince was right. She had a need to be superior, to position herself above whatever situation she was in. Maybe that's what Friday night had been about. Not attraction to Eddie Brooks, but the thrill of having something I didn't know about. The power that came from fooling the husband who thought he knew her completely. "I need to go to work," I said, checking the time. "Henderson's got that Morrison project review at 10. "You sure you're up for it?" "Work's the only normal thing left in my life right now. I'm not giving that up, too." The drive to Henderson Architecture gave me 20 minutes to think. I'd been with the firm for 5 years, working my way up from junior draftsman to project manager. I loved the work, taking someone's dream and turning it into blueprints, then watching those blueprints become reality. There was something satisfying about creating things that would outlast you. Unlike marriages, apparently. Mark was waiting by my desk when I arrived, looking even worse than he had yesterday. His tie was crooked, his shirt wrinkled, and he had the unmistakable appearance of a man who'd slept in his car. "Matt, thank God you're here. I've been thinking about our conversation all night, and I feel terrible about—" "Don't," I cut him off. "You did the right thing. I needed to know. But your marriage was already over. I just didn't know it yet." I sat down and powered up my computer. "What you told me didn't break anything, Mark. It just showed me what was already broken." He looked relieved, but still guilty. "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes. I need you to send me that video. The one from Jennifer's Instagram." Mark's face went pale. "Matt, I don't think that's a good idea. You've seen it already, right? Why torture yourself?" "Because I need evidence. If this goes to divorce court, I want documentation." That was partially true. But mostly I wanted the video, because knowledge was power, and I had the feeling I was going to need all the power I could get. Mark reluctantly forwarded me the link, along with screenshots he'd taken before Jennifer made her profile private. Smart girl. She'd probably realized by now that posting videos of married coworkers grinding on their bosses wasn't great for office politics. I spent the morning throwing myself into the Morrison project, a luxury condo complex that would probably house people like Eddie Brooks, rich, entitled, convinced that money could buy them anything they wanted, including other people's wives. Around noon, my work phone rang. The caller ID showed Lila's office number. Matt Lawson. Matt, thank God. It's me. I should have hung up immediately. Instead, I found myself curious about what she'd say. How do you explain away video evidence of infidelity? What possible spin could make Friday night look innocent? I have nothing to say to you, Lila. Please, just listen for 1 minute. That video, it looks worse than it was. Eddie was drunk, and he was being inappropriate, but I was trying to handle it professionally. I couldn't just walk away from a senior partner without causing a scene. It was a good lie, I had to admit. Plausible enough that a more trusting husband might have bought it. But I'd watched that video a dozen times now, and I'd seen the look on her face. That wasn't professional tolerance. That was enjoyment. What about the migraine, Lila? What about being too sick to get out of bed? Silence on the other end. Then, I was feeling better by evening, and Nina convinced me to come out for just an hour. I didn't want to bother you since you were helping Vince move. Another lie, smoother than the first. She'd had time to work on her story. We're done, I said. Don't call me again. Matt, wait. I hung up and immediately blocked her office number too. My phone was finally blissfully quiet. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing structural calculations when the receptionist called to tell me someone was here to see me. I expected a client or maybe a contractor with questions about the Morrison project. Instead, I found Lila standing in our lobby, looking perfectly composed in her charcoal gray suit and pearls. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a professional chignon, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was heading into court, not trying to save her marriage. Hello, Matt. Everyone in the lobby was staring. Henderson Architecture was a small firm, maybe 20 employees total, and office drama was rare. But a man's estranged wife showing up unannounced? That was gossip gold. You need to leave, I said quietly. We need to talk, like adults. Adults don't lie to their spouses about being sick so they can go party with their coworkers. Her composure cracked slightly. Can we please do this somewhere private? No. We can do this nowhere. You're not welcome here. That's when she made her mistake. Instead of leaving gracefully, instead of preserving what little dignity she had left, Lila raised her voice. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage over one misunderstanding. The lobby went completely silent. Even the phone stopped ringing. Misunderstanding? I kept my voice level, professional. Is that what we're calling it now? I never cheated on you, Matt. I danced with a coworker at a work party. That's not grounds for divorce. You lied to me. You looked me in the eye and told me you were sick, then went out and let another man put his hands all over you while your coworkers cheered. If that's not cheating, it's close enough. Lila's face flushed red. She wasn't used to being challenged in public, wasn't used to being the one on the defensive. At home, she could control the narrative, twist words until up was down and wrong was right. But here, with an audience, her usual tactics weren't working. You're being unreasonable, she said, her voice getting shriller. Marriage is about forgiveness, about working through problems together. Marriage is also about honesty, I replied. Something you seem to have forgotten. That's when she really lost it. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, I went to the party. Yes, I danced with Eddie. And yes, I lied about being sick because I knew you'd be jealous and possessive like you always are. The words hung in the air like a slap. Jealous and possessive. Is that how she saw me? The husband who brought her aspirin and never questioned her late nights at the office? There's the truth, I said calmly. Finally. Henderson's security guard, a retired cop named Dave who took his job seriously, appeared at my elbow. Everything okay here, Matt? Mrs. Lawson was just leaving, I said. Lila looked around the lobby, seeming to realize for the first time that everyone was staring at her. Her carefully constructed professional image was crumbling in real time, and she knew it. This isn't over, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Yes, it is. Dave escorted her to the elevator, and I watched the doors close on 3 years of my life. The lobby stayed quiet for a long moment after she left, then slowly returned to normal. But I caught people glancing at me for the rest of the day, whispering in small groups by the coffee machine. By 5 o'clock, everyone at Henderson Architecture knew that Matt Lawson's wife had cheated on him and then tried to blame him for being jealous. It wasn't the kind of reputation I'd wanted, but it was better than being seen as a fool. That evening, Vince and I grabbed dinner at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar downtown that served the greasiest burgers and coldest beer in the city. It was the kind of place where nobody cared about your problems as long as you paid your tab and didn't start fights. "Heard you had some excitement at work today," Vince said, attacking his burger with enthusiasm. "News travels fast. Mark called me, said Lila showed up and caused a scene." I filled him in on the confrontation, including her admission that she'd lied because she thought I was jealous and possessive. Vince listened while demolishing his dinner, occasionally shaking his head in disgust. "Jealous and possessive," he repeated when I finished. "That's rich, coming from someone who used to get upset when you talked to waitresses." He was right. Lila had always been the jealous one in our relationship, the one who questioned me about female coworkers or got quiet when I mentioned grabbing drinks with old friends. I'd always chalked it up to insecurity, something she'd outgrow as our marriage got stronger. Now, I wondered if it had been projection. Maybe she'd been so suspicious of me because she was already thinking about being unfaithful herself. "So what's the plan?" Vince asked. "Divorce, obviously. But I want to do this right. Clean break, no going back. You thinking about getting a lawyer?" "Eventually, but first, I want to see how deep this goes." Vince raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning Friday night might not have been the first time. If Lila's been cheating, I want to know how long it's been going on and with whom." "And then?" I took a long drink of beer and considered the question. What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple, too crude. I didn't want to hurt Lila. I wanted her to understand what she'd thrown away. I wanted her to feel the same sense of betrayal and loss that was eating me alive. Then I want her to face the consequences of her choices. Vince grinned. "Now you're talking my language." As we walked back to his warehouse, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was Lila using someone else's phone. But something made me open it. "This is Nina Walsh from Brooks, Patterson and Associates. We need to talk. It's about Lila and Eddie." Nina Walsh. I remembered her from a few office parties, Lila's best friend at the firm, a gossipy brunette who always seemed to know everyone's business. If anyone knew the truth about what had been happening between my wife and Eddie Brooks, it would be her. I showed the text to Vince. "Could be a trap," he said. "Could be, but it could also be the break I need." I texted back, "Murphy's Pub tomorrow at 6. Come alone." The response came immediately. "I'll be there. And Matt, you're not going to like what I have to tell you." I was beginning to realize that there was a lot about my marriage I wasn't going to like. But I was done being the husband who didn't ask questions, who trusted blindly and assumed the best. If Lila wanted to play games, I was ready to learn the rules. Nina Walsh was already waiting when I arrived at Murphy's the next evening. She'd chosen a corner booth in the back, away from the bar's usual crowd of construction workers and off-duty cops. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she looked nervous, constantly checking her phone and glancing toward the door. I slid into the booth across from her. "Thanks for reaching out." "I wasn't sure I should," she said, wrapping her hands around her wine glass. "But after what happened at your office yesterday, I figured you deserved to know the truth." The waitress came by, and I ordered a beer. Nina waited until we were alone again before continuing. "Lila's my friend," she said. "Or she was. But what she's doing isn't right, and someone needs to tell you." "What exactly is she doing?" Nina took a deep breath. "She's been seeing Eddie for 3 months. It started after the Christmas party in December. She said you two were having problems, that you were growing apart. 3 months. While I'd been bringing her coffee in bed and planning our anniversary trip, she'd been sneaking around with Eddie Brooks for 3 months. Define seeing, I said. They meet for lunch twice a week. Dinners when she tells you she's working late, and... Nina hesitated. They've been to his condo. Multiple times. My beer arrived, and I took a long drink to buy myself time to process this. It was one thing to suspect your wife of cheating. It was another to have it confirmed by someone who'd witnessed it firsthand. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Nina looked uncomfortable. Because Eddie's married too. His wife Sarah is a friend of mine from law school, and she has no idea what's going on. She's been asking me if I think Eddie's acting strange lately, if I know why he's been so distant. So this is about protecting Eddie's wife, not helping me. It's about both, Nina said firmly. What they're doing is wrong, and it's going to blow up in everyone's faces. Sarah doesn't deserve to be blindsided, and neither did you. I appreciated her honesty, even if her motives were mixed. What else do you know? They think they're being discreet, but everyone at the firm has noticed. Eddie's been giving Lila the best cases, the high-profile clients. People are starting to talk about favoritism. Is anyone planning to do anything about it? Nina shrugged. Office affairs happen all the time. As long as it doesn't affect their work, management usually looks the other way. But if it becomes public, if it starts damaging the firm's reputation... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Law firms lived and died by their reputations. If word got out that a senior partner was having an affair with a married associate, it would be a scandal that could cost both of them their careers. There's something else, Nina said. Eddie's been bragging about Lila to some of the other partners, talking about how he stole her away from her husband. He thinks it's funny that you don't know. The rage hit me like a physical blow. It was bad enough that my wife was cheating, but to know that her lover was laughing about it, treating my marriage like a joke he'd played on me, that was almost unbearable. Where do they meet? I asked. Usually his condo. Sometimes the Marriott downtown if they want to be extra careful. Eddie likes to show off, though. He took her to that new rooftop restaurant last week, the one that just opened on 5th Street. I knew the place, Skyline, where dinner for two cost more than most people made in a week. Lila had mentioned wanting to try it, and I'd said we couldn't afford it right now. Apparently, she'd found someone who could. Nina finished her wine and checked her phone again. I should go. But Matt, be careful how you handle this. Eddie's got connections all over the city. He could make things difficult for you if he wanted to. Let me worry about Eddie. After she left, I sat in the booth for another hour, nursing my beer and thinking. 3 months of lies. 3 months of coming home to a wife who kissed me hello while planning her next rendezvous with another man. 3 months of being the fool who never suspected anything. But I wasn't a fool anymore. I pulled out my phone and called Vince. You still friends with that guy who works security at the Marriott? Tommy? Yeah, we go way back. Why? I need a favor. 2 days later, Tommy called with information. Eddie Brooks had been a regular at the Marriott for the past 3 months, always booking the same suite on the 14th floor, always paying cash, always checking in with a blonde woman who matched Lila's description. The most recent visit had been yesterday afternoon, while I was at work, and Lila had texted me about a client meeting that might run late. I had photos now. Tommy's security cameras had captured Lila and Eddie entering the hotel together, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. The timestamps matched her text messages to me perfectly. It was time to start evening the score. That Friday, I put my plan into motion. I'd learned from Nina that Eddie was throwing a party at his condo. Nothing formal, just drinks and dinner for some of the partners and their significant others. Lila had told me she was working late again, but I knew better now. Vince and I arrived at Eddie's building around 8 p.m. It was one of those glass towers downtown, all sharp angles and expensive views, the kind of place that screamed money and status. "Nice digs," Vince said as we walked through the marble lobby. "How'd you get us in?" I told the doorman we were Eddie's guests. Amazing how confident you can sound when you stop caring about the consequences. Eddie's condo was on the 20th floor, and we could hear the party before we got off the elevator. Jazz music, laughter, the clink of expensive glassware. Through the open door, I could see maybe 15 people in designer clothes, holding cocktails and talking about whatever rich lawyers talk about. And there, in the center of it all, was my wife. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she'd said was too fancy for anywhere we could afford to go. She was laughing at something Eddie had whispered in her ear, her hand resting casually on his chest. They looked comfortable together, natural, like a couple. "You ready for this?" Vince asked. "I've been ready since I saw that first video." We walked into the party like we belonged there. Most of the guests were from Lila's firm, people I'd met at various work functions over the years. A few of them recognized me and looked confused, probably wondering what Lila's husband was doing at Eddie's party. Lila saw me first. The color drained from her face, and she took a step back from Eddie, but it was too late. Everyone had seen them together, seen her guilty reaction to my arrival. "Matt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said conversationally. "Thought I'd stop by and see how your client meeting was going." Eddie, to his credit, recovered quickly. He stepped forward with a politician's smile, extending his hand like we were old friends. "Matt, great to see you again. Lila didn't mention you were coming." "Lila doesn't mention a lot of things," I replied, ignoring his outstretched hand. The party had gone quiet around us. Everyone could sense the tension, could tell that something was about to happen. I saw Nina in the crowd, her eyes wide with anticipation and dread. "Actually, Eddie, I wanted to thank you," I continued, "for being such a good friend to my wife, taking her to dinner when I'm too busy with work, keeping her company when she has to work late. It's nice to know she has someone looking out for her." Eddie's smile faltered. He was smart enough to recognize a trap, but not smart enough to avoid it. "It's nothing," he said, "just colleagues helping each other out." "Is that what we're calling it?" I picked up a glass of red wine from a nearby table, some expensive vintage that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Colleagues helping each other out, I like that." I turned to face the crowd, raising my glass like I was making a toast. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Eddie Brooks for helping my wife so much over the past 3 months, really going above and beyond the call of duty. The Marriott Hotel Suite, the dinners at Skyline, all those late-night client meetings. It's the kind of personal attention you just don't see in the workplace anymore." The silence was deafening. Everyone was staring at Eddie and Lila, putting the pieces together. Nina had gone pale, probably realizing that her information had led to this moment. "Matt, please," Lila said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Don't do this here." "Where would you prefer? At home, where you can lie to me again? At my office, where you can scream at me in front of my coworkers?" Eddie finally found his voice. "I think you should leave." "You know what I think, Eddie? I think you're absolutely right." I turned toward his pristine white leather couch, the centerpiece of his minimalist living room. It probably cost more than my car. "Oops," I said, and poured the entire glass of wine across the cushions. The red wine spread like blood across the white leather, soaking in immediately. Eddie lunged toward the couch, but Vince stepped into his path, all 6'4" of him creating an immovable barrier. "Easy there, Romeo," Vince said pleasantly. "Accidents happen." "That couch cost $12,000, Eddie sputtered. "Then you can afford another one," I replied. "Consider it the price of dancing with another man's wife." I set the empty wine glass on his coffee table and headed for the door. The crowd parted in front of me like the Red Sea, everyone too shocked to speak. "Oh, and Eddie?" I called back from the doorway. "Next time you want to brag about stealing someone's wife, make sure her husband doesn't have friends who hear everything." Lila was crying openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the confident, composed woman who had walked into this party on Eddie's arm. "Matt, wait," she called after me. "Please, we need to talk." "No," I said without turning around. "We really don't." Vince and I left them there, Eddie staring at his ruined couch, Lila sobbing in her red dress, and 15 witnesses who would be talking about this party for years to come. In the elevator, Vince was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "That was beautiful, man. Did you see Eddie's face when you poured that wine? I thought he was going to have a heart attack." "It's not over yet," I said. "What's next?" "Now we wait and see how they handle the fallout. Because after tonight, everyone at that firm knows exactly what's been going on." My phone started buzzing before we reached the lobby. Calls and texts from Lila, probably begging me to come back, to let her explain. I turned it off without looking. The game had changed. For 3 months, Lila and Eddie had held all the cards, knowing something I didn't, laughing at my ignorance. But now the truth was out in the open, and they were the ones scrambling to control the damage. I wasn't the cuckolded husband anymore. I was the man who had walked into their private party and exposed their affair in front of everyone who mattered in their professional world, and I was just getting started. The fallout from Eddie's party began immediately. By Monday morning, the story had spread through Brooks, Patterson, and Associates like wildfire. Nina texted me updates throughout the day, how Eddie had spent the weekend trying to get his couch professionally cleaned, how Lila had called in sick, how the senior partners were having hushed conversations behind closed doors. "HR wants to see both of them tomorrow," Nina's text read. "Word is they're investigating potential ethics violations." I was reviewing blueprints at my desk when Mark appeared, looking more excited than I'd seen him since this whole mess started. "Dude, you're famous," he said, pulling up a chair. "My girlfriend works at that catering company that does events for law firms. She says everyone's talking about what you did Friday night." "It's not about being famous," I said. "It's about consequences." "Still, walking into that guy's party and calling him out in front of everyone? That took balls." Maybe it did. But it had also felt necessary, like something that had to happen for me to move forward. I'd spent 3 months being the fool who didn't know his wife was cheating. Friday night, I'd become the man who fought back. My phone rang around noon. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "We need to talk." Eddie Brooks sounded tired, defeated. Gone was the smooth confidence I'd heard at his party. "I don't think we do," I said. "Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this situation has gotten out of hand, and we need to find a way to resolve it, like adults." "Adults don't sleep with other people's wives, Eddie." "It's complicated." "No, it's really not. You wanted my wife, you took her, and now you're dealing with the consequences. That's not complicated. That's just life. The firm is talking about suspending both of us pending an investigation. Lila could lose her job over this. Then she should have thought about that before she started meeting you at the Marriott." Silence on the other end. Then, "How did you know about the hotel?" "I know a lot of things, Eddie. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you want?" It was a good question. What did I want? Money seemed too simple, and I didn't need Eddie's cash anyway. An apology would be meaningless. The only thing I really wanted was for both of them to understand what they'd cost me. "I want you to leave town," I said finally. "What?" "You heard me. Pack up your Porsche and your $12,000 couch and find somewhere else to practice law. There's a big world out there, Eddie. Go explore it." "I can't just leave. I have a practice here, clients, responsibilities." "You should have thought about that before you decided to play games with my marriage." I hung up before he could respond. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with texts from Lila's number. She'd apparently gotten a new phone or convinced someone to let her use theirs. Matt, please, Eddie told me you want him to leave town. This is crazy. We can work this out. I typed back, nothing to work out. You made your choice. I chose wrong. I know that now. But don't destroy his career over my mistake. His career, his problem. You want to protect him? Maybe you should have thought about that before you let him parade you around town like his trophy. The messages stopped after that, but I knew this wasn't over. Lila was smart, calculating. She'd regroup and try a different approach. I didn't have to wait long to find out what that would be. Wednesday evening, I was grabbing dinner at a diner near Vince's warehouse when she appeared. Not Lila, I'd have seen her coming. This was Sarah Brooks, Eddie's wife. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4", with graying blonde hair and tired eyes. She slid into the booth across from me without being invited. "You're Matt Lawson," she said. It wasn't a question. "And you're Sarah Brooks." I heard about what happened at Eddie's party Friday night. I wanted to thank you. That surprised me. Thank me? For confirming what I already suspected. Eddie's been lying to me for months, telling me he was working late, going to client dinners. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Sarah ordered coffee from the waitress and settled back in her seat. She looked calm, composed, nothing like the devastated wife I'd expected to meet. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About the affair? I suspected it started around Christmas. Eddie's not as clever as he thinks he is. New cologne, working out at the gym, suddenly caring about his appearance after 15 years of marriage. Classic midlife crisis behavior. Why didn't you confront him?" Because I needed proof. In divorce court, suspicion isn't enough. But now, thanks to you, I have witnesses. 15 people who saw them together at that party, who heard you lay out the timeline of their affair. I was beginning to understand why she'd sought me out. "You're divorcing him." "Filed the papers this morning. Eddie doesn't know yet. He's been staying at a hotel since Friday, probably trying to figure out how to salvage his reputation." Sarah's coffee arrived, and she added cream with steady hands. Everything about her radiated calm determination. "I have a proposition for you," she said. "I'm listening." "Eddie's been hiding assets, moving money around, preparing for this day. He thinks I'm just a housewife who doesn't understand finances. But I used to be an accountant before we got married, and I've been tracking every dollar. What does that have to do with me? Because some of those dollars were spent on your wife, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts. In a divorce proceeding, that's called dissipation of marital assets. If I can prove he was spending our money on his affair, I can claim those amounts in the settlement." I was starting to see where this was going. "You need documentation. I need receipts, credit card statements, anything that shows a pattern of spending on Lila, and I think you might be able to get them." "How?" Sarah smiled for the first time since she'd sat down. "Because Eddie's desperate. He's facing a messy divorce, a potential suspension from the firm, and public humiliation. Men like Eddie make stupid decisions when they're desperate." She was right. Eddie had already made one stupid decision by calling me earlier. He was scared, off balance, exactly the kind of state that led to mistakes. "What are you suggesting?" "Meet with him. Let him think you're willing to negotiate, to keep quiet about the affair in exchange for something. While he's focused on managing you, he won't be watching his back." "And you'll be watching his back." "My lawyer will be. Eddie's sloppy when he's panicked. He'll leave trails, make copies, try to cover his tracks in ways that actually make them more visible." I thought about it. Sarah's plan had merit, and it would give me a chance to see Eddie squirm. But there was something else, something that appealed to the part of me that wanted justice. "What's in it for me?" I asked. "Satisfaction, and maybe some information you can use in your own divorce proceedings." "I haven't filed yet." "But you will, and when you do, you'll want evidence of adultery. I can help you get it." We shook hands across the diner table, two betrayed spouses, forming an alliance against the people who had lied to them. "One more thing," Sarah said as she prepared to leave. "Be careful. Eddie's not just desperate, he's angry. He blames you for ruining his life, and angry men do unpredictable things. Let him be angry. Angry people make mistakes." "Yes," Sarah said. "They do." After she left, I sat in the diner for another hour, planning my next move. Eddie wanted to meet, wanted to negotiate like adults. Fine, I'd give him a meeting he'd never forget. I pulled out my phone and called the number he'd used earlier. "Eddie, it's Matt. You want to talk? Meet me at the Riverside construction site tomorrow night at 9. Come alone." "Why there?" "Because it's private, and because I want to make sure we understand each other completely." The Riverside site was a luxury hotel project I'd worked on last year. Construction had been halted due to permit issues, leaving a half-finished steel skeleton on the waterfront. It was isolated, dark, and perfect for the kind of conversation I had in mind. "Matt, I don't think—" 9 o'clock, Eddie. Don't keep me waiting." I hung up and smiled. Tomorrow night, Eddie Brooks was going to learn what it felt like to be afraid, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Eddie was 10 minutes late, which told me everything I needed to know about his state of mind. The old Eddie, confident, in control, would have been early, would have tried to dominate the meeting from the start. This Eddie was scared, hesitant, probably sitting in his car working up the courage to face me. The Riverside construction site was perfect for what I had in mind. 20 floors of unfinished hotel rising into the night sky, surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. I'd gotten us inside through a gate I knew the security company never properly locked, one of the advantages of working in construction for 5 years. I was waiting on the 3rd floor when Eddie finally appeared, picking his way carefully across the concrete subfloor with his phone's flashlight. He was dressed in an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the industrial setting, like he'd gotten lost on his way to a board meeting. "Matt?" His voice echoed in the empty space. "Where are you?" "Up here." I stepped into view, silhouetted against the city lights visible through the unfinished windows. "Thanks for coming, Eddie." He climbed the temporary stairs slowly, obviously uncomfortable with the surroundings. When he reached the 3rd floor, I could see sweat on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "This is a hell of a place for a meeting," he said, trying to sound casual. "I like the privacy. No witnesses, no interruptions, just 2 men having an honest conversation." Eddie looked around nervously. "Look, Matt, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, and the sound bounced off the concrete walls. "Eddie, angry doesn't begin to cover it. Angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I feel is something else entirely. I never meant for it to happen. Lila and it just developed naturally. Naturally, like a disease. She told me you 2 were having problems, that your marriage was already over. My marriage was fine until you decided you wanted my wife." Eddie took a step back, and I realized he was genuinely afraid of me. Good. Fear was useful. "What do you want, Matt? Money? I can write you a check right now, whatever amount seems fair. You think this is about money? Then what? What will it take to make this go away?" I walked closer, and Eddie backed up until he hit a concrete pillar. In the dim light from the city below, his face looked pale and desperate. "It's not going away, Eddie. Your wife filed for divorce this morning. HR is investigating you for ethics violations. Half the legal community in this city knows you're a cheater who brags about stealing other men's wives. This isn't something you can buy your way out of." "Sarah filed for divorce?" The news hit him like a physical blow. "How do you know that?" "Because she told me. We had coffee yesterday, 2 betrayed spouses comparing notes. Turns out you've been even stupider than I thought." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Eddie and Lila entering the Marriott together, timestamp clearly visible. "Hotel security cameras, Eddie. Your wife's lawyer has copies of all of them. Every lunch date, every romantic dinner, Every afternoon you spent in that suite while I was at work and Sarah was at home thinking you loved her. Eddie stared at the photo, his face crumbling. Oh God, Sarah's going to take everything. Probably. Adultery tends to be expensive. You don't understand. I can't lose everything. The practice, the house, my reputation. You should have thought about that before you decided to play games with people's lives. That's when Eddie made his second mistake of the evening. Instead of accepting responsibility, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, he got angry. This is all your fault, he snarled. If you'd been a better husband, if you'd paid attention to what Lila needed, none of this would have happened. Excuse me? She was lonely, Matt. Married to a blue-collar nobody who couldn't give her the life she deserved. I offered her something better, and she took it. That's not my fault. That's yours. The rage that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. For months, I'd been the understanding husband, the reasonable man trying to process his wife's betrayal with dignity and maturity. But hearing Eddie blame me for his own actions, hearing him call me a blue-collar nobody, that shattered what was left of my self-control. I grabbed Eddie by his expensive tie and slammed him back against the pillar. A nobody, I hissed. I'm the nobody who built the building you live in, Eddie. I'm the nobody who designed half the offices downtown where you and your lawyer friends play your little games, and I'm the nobody who's about to destroy your entire life. Eddie's eyes went wide with terror. Matt, please. Please, what? Please don't hurt you. Please let you keep screwing my wife. Please pretend this never happened. I released his tie and stepped back, breathing hard. Eddie slumped against the pillar, his perfect hair disheveled, his suit wrinkled. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice deadly calm. You're going to resign from your firm. You're going to give Sarah everything she wants in the divorce. And you're going to leave this city and never come back. I can't. Yes, you can. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Every client, every colleague, every judge in the county. I'm going to tell them how you bragged about stealing another man's wife, how you laughed about fooling the blue-collar nobody who never suspected anything. Eddie was crying now, tears streaming down his face. You're destroying my life. No, Eddie, you destroyed your own life. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. That's Vince. He's downstairs with a few friends, just in case you were thinking about doing something stupid. You remember Vince, right? The bouncer who kept you from attacking me at your party? Eddie looked toward the stairs, probably calculating his chances of making it past Vince and whoever he'd brought with him. Smart Money said those chances were zero. I'll leave, he said finally. I'll resign, give Sarah the divorce, leave town, just call off your friends. They're not here to hurt you, Eddie. They're here to make sure you don't hurt yourself. Desperate men sometimes do desperate things, and I'd hate for you to have an accident on this construction site. It was a lie, of course. Vince was probably at home watching TV. But Eddie didn't know that, and fear was making him stupid. How do I know you'll keep quiet if I do what you want? Because I'm not like you, Eddie. I don't break my word. Eddie straightened his tie and tried to compose himself, but the damage was done. He looked like what he was, a broken man who'd gambled everything and lost. What about Lila? What about her? Are you going to hurt her? The question surprised me. Even now, even after everything that had happened, Eddie was worried about my wife. Maybe he really did care about her, in his own selfish way. Lila's not your concern anymore, I said. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. Eddie nodded and headed for the stairs. He moved like an old man, defeated and broken. At the top of the stairwell, he turned back. For what it's worth, Matt, I am sorry. Not for what I did. I can't change that. But for how it happened. For the pain we caused. No, you're not, I replied. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. After he left, I stood alone in the unfinished building, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Lila was probably waiting for Eddie to call, to tell her how the meeting had gone. She'd be disappointed. My phone rang, Lila's new number. "Hello, Lila." "Matt, thank God. Eddie told me he was meeting you tonight. Is he okay?" "He's fine. Scared, humiliated, and probably unemployed by tomorrow, but fine." "What did you do to him?" "I told him the truth about his situation. Apparently nobody's done that in a while." "Matt, please. This has gone far enough. Eddie's talking about leaving town, about giving up everything. You've won. Isn't that enough?" Won. As if this had been some kind of game, some competition with winners and losers. "I didn't win anything, Lila. I lost my wife, my marriage, 3 years of my life. Eddie's just paying the price for taking those things from me. I was never his to take. I made my own choices. Yes, you did. And now you get to live with them. So that's it? You're just going to destroy both our lives and walk away?" I thought about that question as I made my way down the construction site stairs. Was I destroying their lives, or was I simply refusing to let them destroy mine without consequences? "Your life isn't destroyed, Lila. It's just different now. You wanted excitement, adventure, a man who could give you things I couldn't. Well, congratulations. You found him. The fact that he turned out to be a coward who runs away when things get difficult isn't my problem. Eddie's not running away. He's trying to protect what's left of his career. Eddie's running away because he's a coward who thought he could play games with people's lives without paying a price. And you're defending him because you still don't understand what you've done." "What I've done? Matt, I had an affair. People have affairs every day. It doesn't make me a monster." "No," I said, stepping out into the cool night air. "It makes you a stranger. The woman I married wouldn't have lied to me for 3 months. She wouldn't have let another man put his hands on her while her husband brought her aspirin for fake headaches. She wouldn't have defended the man who called her husband a blue-collar nobody who didn't deserve her." Silence on the other end of the line. "Eddie called you that?" "Among other things. But don't worry, I'm sure he didn't mean it. He was just scared, saying whatever he thought would save his skin." "Matt, I didn't know he said those things." "There's a lot you don't know about Eddie Brooks, Lila. But you'll have plenty of time to find out, assuming he doesn't disappear completely." "Where are you going? Can we meet somewhere and talk?" "No, we're done talking. Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch." "Matt, wait." I hung up and turned off my phone. In the distance, I could see the lights of downtown, the buildings I'd helped design and construct. This city was my home, my workplace, my life. Eddie Brooks could run away to wherever men like him went when their comfortable worlds collapsed. But I was staying right here. 3 months ago, I'd been a trusting husband who believed his wife when she said she had a migraine. Tonight, I was a man who'd faced down his wife's lover in an abandoned construction site and watched him crumble. The transformation wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. And as I walked back to my car, I realized something had changed inside me. The anger was still there, but it was controlled now, focused. I wasn't the same man who'd discovered that video on Jennifer's Instagram. I was someone harder, someone who'd learned that the people you love most can betray you without warning. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. Lila and Eddie had taught me that lesson. Now they were going to live with the consequences of being such good teachers. I drove home through the empty streets, past the buildings I'd helped create, toward whatever came next. Behind me, the construction site rose into the darkness like a monument to unfinished business. But my business with Eddie Brooks was finished, and soon my business with Lila would be too.